guys, and welcome to this week's installment of Tuesdays with Lauri. My name is Lauri Laukkanen and I'm one of the editors at SLR Lounge. You can also find me on Facebook at Lauri Laukkanen Photography. In this week's installment of Tuesdays with Lauri, we're going to be taking a behind-the-scenes look at my latest photograph titled I Bleed Colors. And first off, let's start out by taking a quick behind-the-scenes look at the shoot itself so you guys get a feel for the location and the lighting that I was using. So with that said, here you go. So as you guys could see in the behind the scenes video, this setup was actually quite simple. We were mainly using natural light for this shot and accentuated our model's face just a tiny bit by adding a speed light to the shot. So in this lighting diagram we have our model here and the camera. So now we're gonna add a softbox, and it's coming down from quite high, from in a 45-degree angle, pointing straight down at our subject. So this here, as you could see in the behind the scenes video itself, is pretty much the light that we had. So we had a speed light coming through this softbox pointing at our model from a 45-degree angle. I myself used a stepladder to get a bit higher and get a bit more of a bird's eye look at our subject. And that's pretty much all that went into the shot in terms of the setup itself. So now you guys have seen the behind the scenes look and understand the setup itself quite well. So now let's open up Photoshop and go through the file layer by layer so you guys get an overview of what went into the making of this photograph. What were the decisions that I had to take into consideration when editing this photograph. With that said, let's open up Photoshop. So here you guys can see the final image titled I Bleed Colors, but let's take a look at the before image, the image straight out of the camera. So it looked like this. As you guys can see, it's a bit complex. It has a lot of things happening, a lot of things going on, a lot of colors. We have all these ropes coming here. We have all the different colors. It's a bit messy. So my goal with editing this photograph was to kind of bring it all back together and kind of simplify it in a way that the viewer felt or it was easier for the viewer to view this image. So let's start out. I have 4 folders here. The first fix is in color grading, adding a frame and texture, hue and saturation, and final sharpening. So let's go through this file layer by layer and you guys get a feel for what went into the making of this photograph. So first, let's take a look at the first fixes in color. So I'm going to turn these off and let's go through these layer by layer. The first thing I wanted to address was this blue sky here. I felt it was a bit too distracting. I wanted to get rid of it, or at least make it a bit more green. So that's what I did first. I used the hue saturation layer and turned the blues into greens. So now I'm turning it on and off. You guys can see the sky turns into a bit more greenish tone, and at the same time the blue ropes, as you guys can see here, they turn into a greenish color as well. And I felt this was actually quite good as it ties in the image a bit better. The blue was an extra color in my opinion, so I got rid of it, made it green. It works better in this image. Then I added a first vignette here. As you guys can see, it just darkens out the edges of this image. And then I went into color grading. I wanted this image to be a bit more greenish, a bit monochromatic, and all of it should a bit go into this greenish tones. So I opened up the curves adjustment layer and color graded this image. We can take a quick look inside this. I added a bit of blue into the shadows and yellow into the highlights and midtones. I added green into the midtones and into the highlights. And in the red channel, you guys can see I added a bit of red into the midtones and quite a lot of red into the highlights. And this is what I got here. So we got this a bit of more greenish color tone into this image. Then I added another vignette as I felt there was a bit too much going on in the edges of the image, so that's what we have here. And then I added a bit of smoke, which again, I'll put it on. You guys can see it lightens up the upper parts here, which I kind of didn't like, but I like the smoke down here. So I added it here everywhere first, and then by adding this black and white layer and changing the blending mode from normal to multiply, I got the image back to a bit darker tones, and we get the shadows into the highlights, or the smoke into the highlights of this image. So that's what we have here. Turn the from normal to multiply, and the opacity down to about 44%. So that was the first fixes in color, and the image is starting to be quite ready actually. The next things what I did were kind of the final fixes and touches to this image that add the final flair to this image. First, I added this frame around the image, which just helps me to see the image better. It separates it from the background a bit more, so that's why I added the frame. And then I added a tiny bit of smoke into the lower parts, just because I liked it there, so I added a tiny bit more. It lightens up the lower part of the image as well, so that's why I have it here. I added a texture to the edges of the image. It acts like a vignette, but adds a tiny bit of texture as well, so that was nice. And then I added noise into the whole image. The only parts where we don't have noise is our model's face and her hands. So that's what we have here. So these were pretty simple finishing touches. And this last hue and saturation folder, it's a very, very subtle thing what's happening here. I'll put it on and off. You probably won't even notice any difference. It's very, very subtle. What I have here is I boosted the yellow saturation by using the hue and saturation panel. So we have the yellows, boosted up the saturation of the yellows, and the same with the greens. We can go down to greens, and you can see I just boosted up the saturation a tiny bit, and that was pretty much it. The last thing what I have here is the final sharpening layers. I used a high pass filter to sharpen up the image. Not the whole image, just our model's face and her hands. So I'll show you guys the layer masks here and here. So yeah, that's pretty much it. So I hope you guys enjoyed this week's video, and as always, if you have any questions or requests for future episodes, just leave a comment down below and I'll do my best to help you all out. If you enjoyed this week's video, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and as always, thank you so much for watching. See you again next Tuesday. Bye.